Well, hello. My name is Steve Hewlett. I present the media show on Radio 4 and write in The Guardian lots of, well, I was going to say rubbish. Of course it's not rubbish. It's great. It's all about media. Anyway, I don't know very much about Italy, I will freely admit, and so I'm really looking forward to learning more. This event, Italy after Berlusconi, What Now for Media Freedom, otherwise known as, well, I'm sure Bunga's got to be into the title somewhere, is held in association with the Frontline Club, of course, in association with the Open Society Foundation and the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism. So I thought we'd try and do this in sort of two bits, really, and we have well, I'll introduce the panel in just a second. First of all, to try and get a handle, using the experts we have here, on what Berlusconi and his influence really meant for media in Italy, and what one might learn from that. And do feel free, well, there'll come a point in the first half there where I'll solicit contributions, and do feel free, make sure you say who you are, and do, given that some of our guests are Italian, one is slightly hard of hearing, but if you can speak slightly slowly and just make sure you're being clear, and not speaking at the rate that I am, that would be appreciated, I'm sure, by the panellists. So we can talk about what you made of Berlusconi. Please use the opportunity to learn from these people what they know about Berlusconi and what that means for Italy. And then in the second half, we're thinking about, now that Berlusconi is gone, then kind of what. So first half, let's try and get a handle on what Berlusconi really meant, what actually happened, and then second half, see where we get to. So I'll introduce them as we go, if that's all right with you. So to start us off, Paolo Mancini. I'm not going to say this in Italian, but my rough and ready translation is that he's a professor at the Department of Political Science at the University of Perugia.
That's a good translation.
That's me. Paolo, please. Tell us what you think about Berlusconi.
Oh, I have to. Okay. I didn't understand it.
Yes.
What, I guess that the room will expect from me something very different. But the issue is that I don't think that Berlusconi has controlled and is controlling the media as a common wisdom seems to state. I have to confess that I'm reading the last book. I see that there are many Italians in the room. I see from the face, of course. And I'm reading the last book from Giampaolo Pansa. Giampaolo Pansa is a famous Italian journalist who wrote the last book. The title, if I'm not wrong, is Giornalistica Arta Straccia. I don't know how to translate in English. Journalist...
Rubbish.
Rubbish, yes. It's not exactly that, but rubbish. Yeah. Okay. He was supposed to be a leftist journalist. Now he's moving on the right. Every journalist has his own affiliation in Italy. This is usual. And it's a nightmare reading this book, because it tells that everybody is against Berlusconi. Everybody in the media system is against Berlusconi, and they give a lot of examples, a lot of different, how to say, events in which journalists have been against Berlusconi. So I feel that there is a common wisdom. Berlusconi is controlling the entire media system in Italy. I don't think this is true. Of course, he's controlling Mediaset. No way. Is partially also controlling Rai? Yes, but not completely. Is controlling the print press? No. Is controlling his own newspaper? Yes, his own newspaper, Il Giornale and Libero, but I would say that most of the print press and the most important elite newspapers are clearly against Berlusconi. I'm not in favor of Berlusconi, I have to say. Don't feel I'm Berlusconist. No, I'm not. But what I want to stress that there is this common wisdom. Italy doesn't have a free press. That is not true. Italy doesn't have a free television. That is not true, because even in Rai, there are talk show, broadcast news, which are against, have been strongly against Berlusconi. And if you read this book from Panza, I mean, yesterday evening I was reading, and at a certain point I decided, okay, I sleep at this point. I was on the bed, and I decided to sleep because it was impossible to go on and reading how bad journalists are against Berlusconi. So, and he's a rightist journalist, and he tells everybody that most of Italian journalism is against Berlusconi. He doesn't say that a big part of Italian journalism is in favor of Berlusconi. So how come that a rightist journalist, Giampaolo Pansa, if you can say rightist, is now strongly supporting the idea that Berlusconi does not control the press? And he's a rightist journalist, I would say. It's a confusing situation.
So it's overstated.
It's overstated. It's a common wisdom. There are many common wisdom about Berlusconi. He's control Mediaset, of course. He's trying to control Rai, of course, but not completely. Print press, no. Is television important? Of course, it's very important. But on the other side, most of television talk shows are not in favor of Berlusconi.
And insofar as he was able to exercise control, was he doing it for political purposes, or was he doing it primarily for commercial purposes?
Both. For instance, is it clear that the market niche of Rete 4, for instance, is a rightist niche, and is a niche made up essentially by old persons, women, and most of Berlusconi voters are women. But of course, there are clear political reasons why he is trying to control the media. But at the same time, also, I mean, you have to understand that the Italian media system is organized along the lines of how to say. Of a sort of segmentation made up by niche built on political affiliation.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll come back to that. Well, next up we have Gianpietro Mazzolini, who is Professor of Sociology of Communication and Political Communication at the University of Milan. So, do you think that Berlusconi's influence is overstated?
I share Paolo's skepticism about this common wisdom, so to speak, because I will explain in a moment why. Look, right now, Berlusconi is out of the scene for the time being, and nobody can say that there is less free than before. Not only the journalists, but also other people around Italy, politicians and citizens. But let me come back to the idea of press freedom. And probably most of you have seen the index of the press freedom for 2012. Italy is 61st now. Nothing to wonder about why, but why Hungary is 40th, so fares better than Italy. I think there is something wrong in the index. It might be, but it's also unfair because you know what's happening in Hungary, and things that are happening in Hungary right now did not happen in Italy during the Berlusconi years. He tried quite a few times to limit the freedom of the journalists and of the media, but eventually it did not succeed in establishing a strong limitation of that freedom. Because there were, Paolo mentioned it, a free press, meaning independent press, which was an opposition press, very strong, especially in the printed media, not so much in the commercial media. But even Rai, which was dominated by the Berlusconi people, had one channel, Rai 3, which was luckily free. And the talk shows that were aired on that channel contributed to keep alive and alert against Berlusconi's attempt to limit the freedom and to dominate the political scene.
But in strategic terms, just take broadcasting for a second. In terms of his broadcasting interests, in strategic terms, was he able to use his political influence and his political power in the political and administrative realm to enhance his media set's interests when compared to, for example, Sky Italia or in relation to Rai or whatever?
Yes, he did. As a matter of fact, in 1996, he didn't comply with the law of mechanical law, which obliged Berlusconi Mediaset to dismiss one channel, Rete 4. He never did. But there was some complicity on the left-hand side of the spectrum because of, domestic reasons. So they didn't push to strongly.
So just clarify. So he was required by the regulator to close it. To do what?
Not to dismiss one channel.
From Rai or Mediaset?
No, for Mediaset, of course. For
and he didn't do it.
And also Rai had to dismiss one channel in order to open to pluralism. Okay. It never happened. So there were rulings by the Constitutional Court obliging the politicians to take action, and it never happened. So in a way, you're right. He exploited his political power in order to defend his own industrial interests.
And did he have, leave aside the sort of the formal mechanisms that he tried to introduce to control the press? Did he have effective control of the press? Did he have enough editors on his side? Did he get a favourable press?
Not the press, not the printed press. Only a few newspapers that were in the conservative right-wing area of politics. Yes, some, but they represent. As Paolo said, Italian journalists can be attached to a political party, all of them. More or less you can place them, these are conservative and close to that party and the other one, so on. So you can go on like that. So even the left-wing newspapers, which were very strongly against Berlusconi, like La Repubblica, were in a way defending the interests of the left-wing parties. So they were not for the public interest. They were not fighting for the public interest. They were fighting for the left-hand side of the.
But were they antagonistic to Berlusconi?
Yes, of course, they were antagonistic.
And were they antagonistic on?
That helped a lot.
Were they antagonistic on all fronts? So in terms of media law and all the rest, were they antagonistic on that or?
On everything. On everything.
So the majority of the press in Italy would have been opposed to him.
Yes, because now I mentioned Repubblica.
I would say the majority.
I mentioned Repubblica, but the independent,
press,
the non-aligned press, like Il Corriere della Sera, like La Stampa, like Il Messaggero, comme ci comme ça. But these major outlets were not really against Berlusconi, but they were not even for Berlusconi. So they kept alive anyway the civil society's reaction against Berlusconi.
So the influence of Berlusconi was overstated, you'd say. You'd go along with Paolo there. Yeah. Do you think that, on balance, media freedom, however you assess that, did media freedom in Italy suffer, in fact, under Berlusconi, or is it merely the perception from places like this, where it was kind of a commonplace to assume that Berlusconi controlled everything, and so obviously it must be bad?
Yes, part of the media, or the Italian media, suffered of limitation of freedom, like the Rai channels dominated by the Berlusconi people, like TG1, which is the most important, used to be, the most important newscast at 8 o'clock in the evening.
That's a Rai channel.
Rai. Yeah. That was the editor of that channel, of that newscast, was a Berlusconi man, put there not by Berlusconi directly, but by the people, the mouthpieces that ran the governing board of Rai.
That he appointed?
Yes, of course.
And did the program then reflect?
Oh, absolutely.
Very definitely.
Absolutely. And that is one of the reasons why it went down in the ratings, really, because people realized it was so clearly in favor of Berlusconi that it was ridiculous.
And is it, again, forgive my ignorance, is it characteristic of Italian politics and media that every government would appoint their own people to run
Absolutely
RAI,
so,
and they would then appoint their own editors.
Prodi, when he took power in 2006, he put a prominent journalist of the left-hand side. I mean, not necessarily an extremist, but you know, in favor of the center-left coalition.
So Berlusconi would not be the first prime minister to have his own editor of this program.
May I follow on this? Yes. To tell you how good is Berlusconi, and I'm not voting for Berlusconi.
Yeah, that's the second time you said that.
Yeah, okay, because I want to be sure that people don't misunderstand me.
But when you say it for the third time, we'll know you.
I stop here. Prodi appointed the new editor of TG1 just 2 months after being appointed prime minister.
Okay.
Berlusconi appointed the new editor of TG1 just 9 months later. So it means that Prodi.
Okay, that's really. Thank you very much. That's really very interesting. Next we have Marco Nadio, who is, forgive me, turning the page. Marco Niada, forgive me, who's a partner of RLM Finsbury, a financial PR firm, but from 1993 to 2008 was London bureau chief of the political and financial Italian daily Il Sole 24 Ore. So, what's your estimation of this?
Yes. Well, I've been around when Berlusconi was around also in Italy, and I think the best description is you can compare that to an empire, okay? When you have an empire, you have what you can control directly, and then you have protectorates. And then when the empire expands, you don't need to have a battle. It's just the fear of a battle that makes people go along your lines. And this is what happened at the maximum of the expansion of Berlusconi. Just an eyebrow was enough for a director of a channel or whatever to do what he was expected to do. When I was in my paper, for instance, Il Sole, which is a center-right paper, free market paper, Berlusconi, I don't think could be depicted as a free market money. It was an oligopolist, if not a monopolist. There were a huge pressure to write things that he loved to do, and we had editors that did that. So even if you can say that the press was, particularly the Republic, well, Republic has always been another fiefdom and kingdom, but others were, Corriere has been in the middle, and others had to adapt some way. So there was a point of the expansion of Berlusconi where he was pretty unchallenged. Then as all empires started to decline, and I think an interesting parallel at this stage is technology. Berlusconi was a visionary at his own time when he started with the private television, and he started all the variety shows, and because he was really good at communicating. And he was unchallenged. Well, he was ruthless. He was without any scruple, if I may say. But he also had a story to tell in terms of television. And the interesting thing is, after that, he started to be defeated by technology. Not much the satellite TV like Murdoch, but the internet. If you look at the last polls in Italy for the mayorship of Milano, Pisapia and so on, it was the social networks that defeated Berlusconi, who was still with the terrestrial TV idea, which was the one of the Agora, and which was the one of a passive viewer, whereas the interactive viewer is coming on the fray. So with that regard, I don't think that even if Berlusconi is still in control of a lot of media, even if he may come back, because we are talking about after Berlusconi. We don't know whether it is so much after. He may come back. But I think he's on a trend of decline that he cannot reverse because he's the man of the past with that regard. And he's completely not capable to control the modern media, which are more anarchic, more interactive, are more for people who are cultivated, whereas he's addressing the old people, the analphabets and all that. I mean, I was listening, probably we have here two professors, I'm sure they know better than I do, but I was listening yesterday to the radio. And apparently the Italians, only 62% of the Italians are connected to the internet still, compared to an average between 80 and 90, Germany, France, UK, Finland and Sweden and so on. When that percentage will raise, I think Berlusconi will be over. He will not be capable to control things. And it is true, I completely agree with Paolo and Gianpietro that Berlusconi was never in control of the situation, but he would have loved to be in control of the situation. And he wasn't capable to be in control of the situation because he came already that Italy, with all its defects, was already in some way a democracy, and he couldn't control. He couldn't do like Mussolini. The only way to do like Mussolini was to control the police. And he never did that. That has to be said at his credit. He thought that through the media he could have controlled the country, but it was not enough. And now, with the modern media, he has missed his train.
So he would have controlled it if he could, but he couldn't.
No, he couldn't. And now he has missed the train because now the media are too modern for him. And I don't think his sons and whatever and nephews are clever enough to
Briefly, yeah.
to make a comeback.
To his final remark about the social media, he's completely right. And even though now Berlusconi has commanded all his people to have a Twitter and Facebook account, all of them, from the actors to the politicians, and the party machine is organizing for the next elections. Still, it's the Berlusconi man persona who is of the past, is a person of the past. So he will fade away.
Okay.
So even though the new media will be in his hands.
Thank you very much for that. That's fascinating. Mattia Bagnoli is a journalist and novelist. Currently works for ANSA, the Italian National News Agency, as the UK correspondent. So you're the working journalist here. Apart from myself, naturally. What do you know? What do you think? Is Berlusconi's influence? Have we got him wrong? Do you think?
No. I mean, I share many of the thoughts of my colleague here. I just wanted to play, a bit the advocate's devil for, the role of the advocate's devil, but I think it's been played massively enough, so I won't do that anymore. And I just want to stress that actually he controlled much of the Italian media for an awful long period of time.
When you say control, give me a sense of what you mean by that.
Well, I mean that the fact that we are not just talking about news. We are talking about a culture that actually he was able to sort of brought into the Italian spectrum, which is this reality show, this sense of we have this figure in Italy, we call them velina, are all these girls, very nice girls, scarcely dressed, that they are in TV nowadays, and these people, they have been part of the Italian culture for the last 20 years basically, and this was something that actually he was very, very keen on propose to the Italian viewers as a way to sort of enjoy the life and not think too much of the boring stuff. And so much entertainment through Berlusconi channel and control of the news, yes, but it was not just controlling the news. We are mainly focusing about news, which is really, really important. But the Italian TV has been really, really dominated all these years by this new way of communication, which was instrumental to power. And I think this is something we didn't cover right now. But
you'll find similar. I mean, it won't be exactly the same, but you'll find similar trends across the Western world, certainly. Actually, across most of the world, in actual fact.
Yeah.
Even China, you'll find it. I mean, you'll find similar trends in terms of TV. It's stretching it a bit, isn't it, to say that that's Berlusconi's control of a market?
No. But another thing I'd like to talk about is it's not just TV in terms of it's not just TV, obviously. We mentioned the print. Yeah, the print press was largely untouched by the Berlusconi revolution, although he controlled Mondadori, which is the biggest Italian publisher. Through Mondadori, he controls a big chunk of the revenues of advertisement. And Berlusconi was very
of the advertisement in Publitalia.
So Berlusconi was very, very keen on not being touched on the things that actually mattered, like money. Like money on the advertisement was you touch the money collected through advertisement, you die.
Also, sorry, just a point on that. he was famous by saying, you know, the Italians do not read.
Don't read.
No, they don't read. So maximum,
Newspapers.
historically, the zenith of the Italian media, written, printed media, was 7 million copies. Whereas in this country is 28 or something. And Berlusconi said they don't care, even if they have a minority of intellectuals who he was despising. When I control the television, I have 24 million Italians on television, so I just take the control of that. But he thought, I think, he thought that without the police and without the papers, he could have controlled Italy only with the TVs. And he didn't succeed in doing that.
I think, obviously, you know,
he got close.
The debate is now, you know, what after Berlusconi, what if, but we tend to forget that actually it's been in power for basically 18 of the last year. You know, looks like long enough for me. I mean, we are talking about like Berlusconi is a bygone era, but it's just there. And the point is, I think that we have a new government, and now we start to appreciate how things are done in a normal country. And I think Berlusconi has always been capable. Yeah, he's always
you're in the right place here, obviously.
No. What I'm saying is that we have to recognize that Berlusconi has always been voted by Italian people, so he always acted in democracy, no question about that. Yeah. And despite his television, he lost twice. So we can't really say that actually Berlusconi was some sort of emperor or some sort of evil Darth Vader controlling the nation. It wasn't like that, but certainly, as my colleagues pointed out, he tried. And secondly, obviously, to be as controlling as possible. This was a tendency, and he loved that.
And do you think, as some of your political colleagues really have sort of suggested, that the underlying structure of the Italian state, of the Italian democracy, of Italian administration, and Italian culture, I suppose, does that mean that it's simply not possible for one person to do as we imagined, I think here, Berlusconi had done in terms of taking complete control?
No, I completely agree. I mean, something that we tend to forget is Berlusconi is the byproduct of a previous crisis. I mean, Berlusconi acts in a context. It is not like a man parachuted from another world. I mean, it was very much a man who exploited a political crisis in Italy, and bear in mind, he was already connected with a political milieu, because he was basically the right arm for Craxi, who was been a major political figure in Italy during the 80s. So he always enjoyed this connection, and at a certain point, when Mani Pulite, clean hands, all that wave of prosecution and very flamboyant cases in Italy brought down the previous political elite in Italy, Berlusconi was there, and he was able to exploit that point of confusion and really putting across a message that at that point in Italy was very, very modern, was very, very novel, and I understand why Italian people in 1994 voted for Berlusconi. I tend to understand less why they did it in 2001. Okay. Or even in 2006. 2006 to me looks like incomprehensible. But 1994 and 2001 was, still completely.
How can you say that? The leftists have not been able to run the country from 2004 to 2006.
Because
this is the problem.
If I can come back to that, just
one word, then we'll go to Damien.
Just one word. That was, to me, was partially because Berlusconi in 2005 basically single-handedly passed a reform of the electoral system, which was very instrumental to create, not because the left then win, but to create a situation of permanent crisis, very, very difficult to control. We are living through the consequences like that right now, and this is the thing that Berlusconi was really, really capable of, which is, sometimes tend to be uneasy.
Okay, we'll come back to this. Damien Tambini on my right wrote a book about the Northern League, I think. So,
well, I have to say, Steve,
you have an Italian-sounding name. Forgive me.
I do, but I have to admit that my expertise in this area is a bit more like Italy before Berlusconi than Italy after Berlusconi. But I'm an expert in media regulation at the London School of Economics, and I just want to. I think you've created, if you don't mind me saying so, Steve, a slightly pathetic straw man, and we've had
I'm only asking.
No trouble at all in kicking it down. Of course, Berlusconi didn't control everything. That is quite obviously the case. The more interesting question is, did he control too much? And did he do so in a way which fundamentally undermined the legitimacy of a relatively new, fragile democratic state? Answer, yes. And I think we need to look at some of the context here. And I have to say to the panelists, I understand dealing with received wisdom very quickly is very important. But I think that slightly kind of complacent, he's gone away, it's not really a problem, never was, it doesn't sum up my position. A few interesting details. Yes, what Berlusconi obviously did was not create the problem. He took over a system of lottizzazione, the division of spoils, whereby within RAI, the Telegiornale 1 goes to, is this right? Confirm me. You know, somebody tell me how the system works. The person that controls the majority in Parliament gets this very important broadcaster with the highest.
And they appoint the board.
And the journalistic appointments are essentially political. It's true that within the coalition system in Italy, the other RAI Telegiornale, the news programs, go to members of the coalition according to some sort of a backroom bargaining. This wasn't invented by Berlusconi, but he perpetuated it. And the difference between him and what went before was that he happened to own the rest of broadcasting media, and that's a very, very big difference. So how much is too much? You know, we can have difficulty drawing the exact line, but that is too much. And I think that is one of the many things that meant that the Berlusconi period really did undermine trust in Italian democracy. Important point, though, we shouldn't blame the media. There are, in my view, as somebody who is at least in part Italian and spent many years in Italy, is that there are real issues of civic trust and democratic participation which go deeper. And political scientists, you quote in your excellent book, Professor Mancini, go back a lot further, even than television, these problems.
So the combination of inheriting a system, which all prime ministers do, which allows them to appoint senior people in the broadcaster, which then turns into even senior editorial appointments, finds its way down. That I've heard that happens in Greece. That happens. That's not that uncommon. It is not unique in that, is it?
We can. I'm sure Professor Mancini will chip in with his idea of the plurality of partialities. You can have a broadcasting system, particularly as things become more plural, where you permit some sort of editorial control, and we even have a debate about whether broadcasters should be more partial in this country. My view is that were it possible to have a robust regulator and a robust and trusted regulatory system, a system of impartial broadcasters is superior to that.
But the critical thing about Berlusconi, you're saying, is that he inherited the power that all Italian prime ministers have, which is a matter of routine, but unusually he owned the commercial media.
Big difference.
And as far as you can see, did he do anything which, and we'll come on to this in just a second, which is likely to prove irreversible?
Well, this is the question. I mean, we think Berlusconi as a personality has gone away, and certainly it's difficult to see his route back at this stage. Nothing's irreversible, but I think there are a number of things which, this technocratic government has a legitimacy problem. It's not democratic elected. I think it's got a very brief time before things get very difficult for it. And my hope is that there are a number of things it could potentially do relatively quickly if it wanted to grasp the nettle of media reform.
Do you see any latent threat to the media freedom that's been described by our Italian friends? Or actual threat, should I say?
Maybe, I believe in media freedom as a value and as an individual right, but I'm not sure that it's the key value in this debate. Broadcasters, after all, tend to be regulated, and the idea of a free broadcaster is something that becomes a bit technical. I think there are very important questions about independence of broadcasters and plurality in the media market, and these aren't confined to Italy. The interesting thing when you think about what has happened in the last 5 years in this country is that we have an instance where a powerful broadcaster appears to have been able to capture important parts of the political establishment in ways which affected law enforcement and in a pretty fundamental way.
Broadcaster? You mean you mean News International? Don't you?
News International.
Not a broadcaster.
Sorry. Not a broadcaster. You're right. A media.
Just
company.
checking.
Yeah.
Thought you meant the BBC for a minute.
Very good.
Sorry. All right. So who would like to contribute at this point? Who would like to tell us what they think? Do tell us who you are, chap there, and then lady at the back there. Do tell us who you are. Thanks.
It's Shuvik Datta. I'd just like to ask the panel. Do they know of any instances where Berlusconi had relationships with other media moguls? For example, Rupert Murdoch of Britain and the United States. Did he meet other media moguls? Did he have connections with other media moguls internationally?
Murdoch, yes.
Was he simply national?
Was he a global? Did he attempt to be a global player?
Murdoch, yes.
Murdoch, yes.
But they
He had Telecinco in Spain.
What Berlusconi? But he fought Murdoch all the way, didn't he?
Well, no. At the end,
the issue is it's a national mogul. It's a global mogul. Cinco in Spain. Before he had something in France. I don't remember. It was so. It's very international. Absolutely. Yeah. Does he have connection to Murdoch? Yes, he's struggling with against Murdoch.
No. No. At the beginning,
no, but now, and he's struggling with Sky, of course. There are international connections, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. It's very interesting. He appointed Murdoch appointed head of the international. When he decided Murdoch to set up a business in Europe, continental Europe, he appointed a lady whose name is Letizia Moratti, who then became mayor of Milan.
A minister.
And she was very close to Berlusconi. So that was a legacy of the period when Berlusconi and Murdoch went along pretty well together.
Lady about them.
I'm Cristina Marconi, freelance journalist. I'd like to ask a question to Mr. Tambini, because you said that you wouldn't put the blame on the media. I don't totally agree with you, because, for instance, there has been this episode in the last few days. A radio station made a joke calling the editor of TG1 and pretending that it was Umberto Bossi speaking. And the editor of TG1, so now we are over, Berlusconi is not there anymore. He replied something like, "You can trust me, you got a friend.
Count on me.
And you can count on me, you got a friend." So I think, I don't really have the feeling that the media used all the freedom they could have had. I don't know. I'd like you to talk a little bit longer about the media position in this, because.
Can I just add a question to that? Question.
Sorry.
I just want to add to that question on the basis of how the Bunga Bunga story was actually covered by the Italian media on Berlusconi. Because what was interesting about it was that actually it wasn't really covered that well at all. There's very few channels. It was the internet that actually covered the story of Bunga Bunga far more extensively.
Were you there watching it?
I'm half Italian. I was working in Italy at the time, and what was fascinating was that all the young people and everything was following it through the internet and through foreign media, as opposed to the Italian media, which didn't really cover it extensively or well at all.
So do you just finish that off? So what do you take that to be an indication of?
For me, it's an indication of how the Italian media is controlled, in the sense that they don't feel able, whether it's pervasive or subversive, in the sense that they don't feel able to criticise as much as a free press would criticise.
Okay.
The internet did. The internet, it was circulating around in the internet in terms of what was going on.
Okay, we'll come back to this one second, because I think that chap is bursting over there.
Yes, Ferdinando Giuliano, Financial Times. I completely disagree with that. You're making Italy sound like a clandestine society. You may be right in terms of news on the TV, but there was one newspaper, Repubblica, which was pretty much dedicated to covering the Bunga Bunga story. And in fact, one of the problems I find with Italian press is that, as Professor Mancini said at the beginning, at times it becomes basically either in favor or against Berlusconi, and you don't really have the kind of more impartial or, in a sense, super partes, as the Latins would say, media which some of us hope for. Can I just dispel a second myth which was made by Professor Tambini when he said there are problems with democratic legitimacy of the current government? I think there are far less than people are making it sound like, given that it's been elected. Well, it's not been elected, but the parliament has voted for the government. And since in Italy governments are made in parliament, this is no different from previous governments. It's right that there wasn't an election at the beginning, but just saying that there are big problems of legitimacy here is just. But
just to take the point on Bunga Bunga coverage on TV, for example. I mean, if, as one of the colleagues here said earlier, Berlusconi thought Italians don't read. National circulation 7 million.
But there is a point there.
Then TV coverage.
No, I think you're right, but it wasn't. It was said that it was only on the internet, which is false. Now, an interesting point I think about newspapers versus TVs, that newspapers are very interesting for the foreign press. So where does the foreign press usually take its information? Most of the time on the Italian newspaper. Now, because Repubblica had this fierce campaign against Berlusconi on the Bunga Bunga themes, the foreign press was able to pick on that. Okay. So I think this is an important qualification to make.
Okay.
Can I briefly, yeah.
Can I pick up a couple of these points?
We'll keep going
several of them were directed at me. The point I was making when I said don't blame the media was that there are longer-term historical problems with Italian democracy which precede the period of television. The issue of legitimacy of the government. Our government in the UK is also elected by Parliament, but it's matters of degree. If you don't have an election between the formation of the government, if it's not clear to the electorate what the eventual government will be, it's matters of degree. It's less legitimate than it would be otherwise.
Well, I think we have to come back to that. You were desperate to say something.
Yeah, I was desperate to comment on that. I mean, I'll try to sum up all the points that have been explored. I think one, coming back to this is a vital issue in Italy, obviously, broadcaster against print, basically. And yeah, basically in Italy, 80% of information in Italy is basically Italian people do not read much, and they get 80% of all information from TV. So actually, if you control TV, obviously it's very, very important. Coming to the other point, no, it's Italian press, print press was very, very active throughout the Bunga Bunga scandals, before and after that. And us, for instance, ANSA, we are a press agency, so we are basically obliged by law to be impartial and pretty much like BBC. And
did you cover it?
I was here in London, so I didn't actually cover it myself.
Did your agency cover it?
Oh yeah, big time. And we were basically first person story.
There is an argument that you could. It's actually a vote winner, so you would cover it more if you were pro Berlusconi. But that's a bit facetious.
Over to you.
My name is Francesca Fanucci and I'm a consultant for Open Society media program. I just wanted to express some slight reservations about the fact that Berlusconi may not have influenced through the media or anywhere the political and scenario in Italy while he was there. It's true. Well, let's start by stating that even now that he's gone, the problem of media pluralism, of lack of media pluralism, still exists in Italy. There's been a long-term tradition. Well, I'm sorry, I do not believe in the plurality of partialities simply because I don't think that we can ask a reasonable viewer to watch one program that is biased, to watch another one, a channel that is biased, extremely biased, I mean, to watch another one that is extremely biased and to decide that the truth stays in the middle.
And is TV, in your view, in Italy, extremely biased?
Oh, yeah, well, definitely definitely it's true that channels, for example, public service broadcasting system is by no means near close to the BBC model that tries to keep a neutral profile. Here we could end up discussing a different method, that is which model of PBS we decide. Personally, it's just my opinion. I do not believe in the plurality of partialities because, like I said, people choose a channel and they stick to it. They may decide to watch maybe 1 or 2 channels, but they do not go through the thoroughly intellectual operation of deciding that the truth sticks to the middle. In this case, you watch Rai Uno and you say, oh, this is Berlusconi. You watch Rai 3 and then you say, oh, this is leftist, then I watch Rai 2 because the truth stays in the middle. No, I'm sorry. This doesn't work like that in my view. But anyway, the point is, when one particular reservation I had was with regard to the threat to the press. Now, it's true that Berlusconi didn't own all the press and there was some quite strongly activist press, but it's also true that the power of Berlusconi did not just reside in his ownership of the media. It resided in the money that he had, in the pressure that he could exercise by threatening, for example, massive lawsuits or for libel, which he did. And because in Italy the law does not allow, or at least doesn't enforce the sanctions for vexatious lawsuits, he could afford to press charges, even against simple comments that he knew he would have lost in court. But because the newspapers couldn't afford the costs, the legal costs that he could, they had a chilling effect. So some papers, except obviously the very sided one, I agree, but you must accept the fact that...
But do you think that as a result of that, you could fairly say that the Italian public were under or misinformed?
Yes. Well, first of all, you must say that it came out also in a recent report, co-authored, among others, by Professor Mazzoleni, that the Italian population still watch mostly TV. It's only the younger band generation that actually watch even TV, but web TVs, the new phenomena, and news via internet. And when Berlusconi, in the last leg of his government, realized that he tried to push through a lot of legislation. First of all, he blocked the investments on the broadband, so the digital divide in Italy is still there, and we hope that this government will tackle it. But his Minister for Communication for Economic Development announced that he would freeze the investment to bridge the gap in digital divide, so he was conscious that he was losing the grip on information. He tried to pass legislation to make blogs and unofficial news websites go through the authorization of Agicom, the equivalent of Ofcom, that incidentally it also strongly lacks independent because 2 members of the commissioners are nominated by the government. I could go on for ages. Last but not least,
to a point.
very, very, very last one. Let's not forget, in terms of cross ownership. There is a norm in the Italian legislation that says a temporary norm that at the moment bans cross-ownership of media, broadcast media, but it's going to expire by the end of the year. So in a year's time, if nothing is done, Berlusconi or whoever else for him will be able to buy media and print press at the same time. So the problem is still there. Whether it is Berlusconi that embodies it or not, in my view, I would still be very worried. Okay. Thank you.
Chap here.
May I respond to this? Because it's not true. It's not true. It's simply not true. Sorry, my microphone is not working.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
It is.
Hello?
They can all hear you.
The talk show, Santoro, very against Berlusconi. 6 million televiewers. 6 million. I'm not talking about. Is this control of a television?
How many lawsuits did he get? Santoro,
excuse me?
Report, Santoro's program, Ballarò. How many lawsuits did they get from Berlusconi?
Are they still there?
Yes,
they are still there.
Yes,
they are still there. Let's talk about Travaglio. How many books does he sell?
Who's paying the lawyers for Santoro? And who's paying the lawyers for Berlusconi?
But no, it's not that true, because they are still there and they are getting a lot of audience. So this is very partial view that they are giving. But this was his choice.
Okay,
it was his choice.
There'll be plenty of time to fight about this in a minute. Hold on a second. Chap here, do.
Hello, my name is Tro Goodchild. I used to be a Reuters journalist and a BBC journalist. When I retired, I did an MA in Italian studies, and so I speak Italian, and I specialised a bit in the Italian media system. I've got two particular questions. I think we're going after Berlusconi.
Shortly.
I don't
Any
think
second now.
there is after Berlusconi.
No.
I think he's still here,
Still
but
there,
still. But we'll be discussing that. But I
Yeah.
have a couple of questions from what I've always wanted to know. But can I just make a few comments? I mean, I've agreed with virtually everything this panel has said. There's something. I mean, you know, every Professor Mancini said something, and Marco over there said something that I agree with. I think the thing comes across to non-Italians that they don't understand that I think Berlusconi is peculiarly Italian. I mean, and also, you know, he reflects Italian culture in a lot of ways and Italian history, and also what Professor Mancini said. I mean, I'm not a Berlusconi fan, but he, like Rupert Murdoch, was a genius. I mean, he first of all created virtually commercial television. He created it single-handedly. I mean, when there was no law that allowed it, he spread his Dallas videos, and so everybody broadcast Dallas at the same time, and it became national television. I mean, this is and then he created a whole political party when it all collapsed. So you know, he is strange, and so I think some of Mr. Chairman, I think you're one of the people who don't really understand some of the very. He's not Rupert Murdoch. I mean, this is, and some of his motivations aren't the same as Rupert Murdoch. I mean, his political motivations aren't exactly the same. He has political motivations, but for his own. But I've got two questions. And I did once. I did have to. I was on the executive of the National Union of Journalists here, and I did have to go and speak to Jussi Grai a few times. And at that time, I found a climate of fear. You know, I mean, this idea that you know, he wasn't so powerful. I found it, but
your questions.
Yeah, my two questions are: did mafia money back him when he created Milano Due?
That's number one, yeah.
Which I mean, which is the key thing, and secondly, since Mario Monti has taken over, has RAI got any better? Are they? Do the RAI journalists feel freer?
Just a month. We'll come back to that. I'm just chat there.
Fadi Hakur from Chatham House. I just wanted to ask: is some members of the panel exaggerating the role of the internet in that it's the Euro crisis that defeated Berlusconi, not the internet? At the end of the day, it's the same Euro crisis that defeated the Greek leadership, as well as the other.
Defeated in Milan by the internet. That's for sure.
And then, what percentage of the Italians access the internet regularly for news? I know in Egypt, for example, where the internet played a big role in overthrowing Mubarak, only 16% actually access the internet. What percentage is it in Italy? Thank you.
Okay.
63.
Chap here.
David Levy from the Reuters Institute. So far, the whole of the discussion has been about Italian exceptionalism. There's a question to Paolo Mancini, because the book he's published raises the question of whether Berlusconi provides a new model of politics for the 21st century. So my question is, should we be talking about Italian exceptionalism, or is Berlusconi, does he represent a wider phenomenon that has relevance and resonance for other places?
Paolo. That was aimed at you, I think. Just that last one. We'll come
last
back.
one.
Yeah.
No, in my view, it's not. I wouldn't. How to say? There is Italy an exceptional case. Yes and no. At the same time, there are many Berlusconis around the world in the political arena. I'm part of this Oxford project on media and democracy in Central Eastern Europe. Central Eastern Europe is full, it's crowded with Berlusconis. So it's not an exceptional case. And my French friend Mousseau wrote a book on Sarko-Berlusconism, similarities between Sarkozy and Berlusconi. Is an exception, yes, because as someone has said before, it's related to Italian culture, to Italian, to a lot of different features of Italian culture. Yes, but at the same time, it represents in some way a new way of doing politics. And Paul Ginsburg, the English historian teaches in Italy, he talks about Berlusconi as a prototype of politics. So my answer would be yes and no. I mean, maybe that in the future of many democracies, maybe democracies that we don't like, there are Berlusconis.
Okay, chap there, and then over there. And then we'll move on.
Hi, my name's Dennis Marks. I spend quite a lot of time in the Mezzogiorno, south of Rome. And this is a question that I came in with, and nobody has yet answered it, although somebody else has raised it, which is that the 2006 election, clearly, most people were surprised by the degree of Berlusconi's success in that election. Jonathan Friedland asked in The Guardian a few days ago why it was that despite undoubtedly all the mistakes that have been made by the coalition in this country in the first year of their governance, people are still predominantly voting against, or look as if they're going to vote against their better interests. Being with old people, Italy has an aging population. It is quite clear that when Berlusconi promised that pensions would be improved, he broke those promises. He did exactly the same in respect of the youth in Italy, where there is a depopulation. Why do the Italians, up until, as somebody said, the Euro crisis got Berlusconi's government out, not democracy? Why were the Italians consistently voting against their better interests?
Gianpietro, what do you think?
I would like to go back to some questions that have been raised, like the one about the Euro crisis and internet. Yes, of course, it wasn't the internet to defeat Berlusconi, that's for sure. And the Euro crisis was probably has to be considered as the deadly blow against Berlusconi. But he, after the scandals of the Banga Banga and similar scandals, public opinion in Italy started to consider Berlusconi under a different aspect, looking differently at him, because his charisma, which he had abundantly in the early years, had declined. So it was also a matter of age, probably. It was a complex of determinants, factors. So it's not only one factor. And the Euro crisis absolutely was probably the final moment when he had to resign. But I would also add the fact that the Italian political system, or the Italian democracy, if you like, is basically very sound and healthy. Because if a president of the Republic who has no power, but he has probably the charisma, or anyway, the possibility, also the technical possibility, to appoint a government which is not elected, well, this is the second time that happens in the Italian Republic. And so, and the previous president just died the other day, Scalfaro, and they were not really loving Mr. Berlusconi, but of course they respected, the procedures, the democratic procedures. And eventually they succeeded in removing the danger of Mr. Berlusconi. So again, something that I was going to say at the beginning, I never saw a really coup d'etat médiatique in Italy, even though, of course, he tried many times, like Francesca said, that to limit pluralism. But it was not only Berlusconi. It was also the complicity, direct and indirect complicity of the opposition, or the leftist parties, which for domestic reasons and for other were instrumental to limit the freedom or the pluralism of television stations in Italy.
Okay, sorry, you want to say, just go on, sorry.
Was that meant to be an answer to my question?
I think that's what I passed it over for, but we'll come back to your statement in just 1 second. Yeah. You wanted to say something about?
Well, there was a specific question about use of the internet in Italy to use news. You asked what percentage of people use the internet to gather news. And the percentage of total users, and these are figures from 2009, were 55.6% of internet users use the internet to get news. Now the access to the internet figures were something around, I think, 50 or 60%.
63 now.
60,
well, it came out
2009.
Yesterday.
And
11. No.
That, I should say that's from Gian Pietro's report from the Open Society Institute. There are some copies of it there, but I think there's a bigger question wrapped up in that, which I think you were a number of people have alluded to, which is, is this particular change, whether or not the immediate triggers for the fall of Berlusconi were anything to do with media change, is in a sense the sun setting on an empire which was built on television power, and the peculiarity of Italy was low newspaper readership, very high television viewership, and we are in a sense the new forms of media. Do they indicate that somehow that's permanently gone now? It's not possible to pull that trick again. And I think that's a bigger question. And I think we can exaggerate the extent to which these news sources are in fact independent from the concentration of resources in journalism and news making. And I think you have to ask complex questions about the flow of news through different media and who is in fact making those news stories, setting the agenda.
Hello. Oh. Hi, I'm Samantha Bolton. I work in PR and I grew up in La Bella Roma. I just had a question really about Monti and the future for politicians who are, I mean, in a way, one of the difficulties in Italy for politicians is there isn't really a Sun or a Daily Mail, with massive readership. And so therefore, like you said, the TV thing, and when you often looked at the Italian populist TV, I mean, Berlusconi was interchangeable with a lot of the presenters, the tan, the suits, the girls. I mean, it was very much like an image, like he was all over the television every time you turned it on. And obviously Mario Monti is kind of much more serious, and the government now are not going to be hanging out with little girls, with a slick back tan and all the rest of it. And I was just wondering how you thought they would be faring, or what would be the future for more serious politicians with the Italian media, given that the newspapers aren't really that read. And just one other comment on social media, on internet. I think it's important to make a little bit of a difference because although maybe not all Italians are on internet in the way of going into a cafe or on their computer, they're all on the telefonino. And, so social media is a different way that those messages have been passed through. And I was just wondering how you thought the new government would be dealing with all these changes.
We'll come to that, and somebody next to you wanted to say something there.
Hi, I just had a rather unorthodox question. Thank you very much for all of your points. I particularly enjoyed the points made by the lady from Open Society Foundations at the front, and I was wondering if there was any chance that she might be able to join the panel for the next range of questions. I think she brings a lot of information. She seems to come from a different perspective, and it would also perhaps change the gender balance a little bit.
It would.
Thank you.
I blame the woman who's organised the session, to be honest. But there you go. Think of it as the Today programme. Somebody down here. There's somebody down here wants to say something. Oh, just down here. Thanks.
I'm Georgia Scoturo, freelance journalist, and going to the post-Berlusconi, whatever that is,
Yep.
I was wondering again about Monti government. It seems like liberalization is one of his mantra at the moment. So my question is to all of you, how much do you think liberalization will have an impact on the media sector, given that Italy is still ruled by very old fascist bodies such as the Order of Journalists that somehow control the media, the freedom of what it's written, not only because some of the journalists who are part of it receive a minimum €3 for peace, and this keeps going on. So I was wondering, in the view of the liberalisation that Monti is trying to introduce, how much would that impact?
Okay. So to bring us towards the end then, to think about the world post-Berlusconi, and if anybody here who knows the answer could answer that gentleman's question about why they voted the way they did in 2006, that would be appreciated. So in reverse order, and taking on board some of the points that have been made, Damien, post-Berlusconi, what do you think?
Well, just to kind of draw some of the things, the things that we've heard from the panel together, first of all, I found it somewhat sobering, and the reason for that is that the standard against which Berlusconi and the current political and media situation in Italy is being measured is so low. You know, the people are somewhat kind of heaving a sigh of relief because he didn't manage to have a coup d'etat and control absolutely everything. And the reference point is authoritarianism, and if we're just outside of there, we're okay. Now, I think this is a moment of particular opportunity in Italy, and transparency of media ownership, cleaning up the appointment system within RAI, having media pluralism regulation that works. All of these things are actually potentially possible if people have a higher standard, and I hope that somehow that can be rectified, because I don't find it very optimistic to see those kinds of standards.
Mattia, do you take that point? Is any of that going to happen, do you think?
Well, I mean, I'm not that optimistic, to be honest, because we are in a very complicated situation. The parliament is still the same parliament elected by the last election. Still, all the MPs, Italian MPs are. In Italy we have, journalists in Italy have this nickname for MPs now, gold fingers, because they are basically paid some say most of Berlusconi's MPs are basically, I wouldn't dare to say employees of Berlusconi, but certainly they are very, very linked with him. So the point is, Mario Monti, to try to answer some of the other questions, is trying, obviously, to bring back the country from the brink of default. This is his main focus. And I think that all of this, what we are all the theme we talked about, pluralism, media, and RAI specifically, are very, very dangerous topics, because this is slightly off the chart and very, very close to political interest of all the parties, not just Berlusconi himself. So how can you? Obviously, what we would like to have is a free RAI, basically similar as much as possible to the BBC. It's this very incendiary topic now in Italy. How can you reform that? You have basically to rewrite the, let's say, constitution of the RAI. So again, what I'm saying is, like, now I really hope that this period of Mario Monti in power would suit like a de-Berlusconization, and create a breathing space for all political parties and Italian society to think as a new Italy in a very different way.
So is anybody in Italy talking about media freedom and plurality and RAI and the rules and the laws, or is that just kind of nowhere in sight because the economic crisis?
No, they do. We talk about that all the time.
All television are full of discussion about freedom of press, freedom of so everywhere.
Okay, sorry, go on.
No, yeah, everywhere. And the point is I'd love to stress the fact that actually, if Berlusconi came to power, it was because there was no law on the conflict of interest. And this was something that Italy had plenty of time, all the political spectrum had plenty of time to reflect, particularly, had plenty of time to reflect on this. And they didn't take the chance. I'm not just excluding Mr. Berlusconi, but seriously considering the point that somebody with too much power could exploit the power for political reasons.
Why did they vote the way they did in 2006?
If I knew the answer, I would probably be somewhere else. I think.
What was the role of the media in making the vote in 2006 the way it was?
Or was there one?
As I said, despite the television, Berlusconi lost twice. This is very important. I mean, it wasn't a continuum. Continuous political power enjoyed by Berlusconi. So what I'm saying is, it's a mix. We could go on and on and on for hours. There are a number of different reasons why Italians kept voting Berlusconi. One of the main, I think, is the left was completely appalling, and it didn't really offer an alternative to moderate Italians who basically are not extremists.
Okay, so one other question then. So when you say de-Berlusconiization, if that's I'm not even sure it's a proper word.
No, I know.
What if you had to do three things, or two things, or one thing? What would you do to enact that?
Well, definitely the reform of the RAI and proper legislation for conflict of interest, not just Berlusconi, but trying to separate.
And so conflict of interest would mean what? Somebody who owned lots of TV stations wouldn't be allowed to become prime minister?
Yeah, you had to basically create a trust and
okay.
not in
so
control.
Who controls them?
Okay, we'll get
but not just media TV, also economic power.
Okay, we'll come to you in just a second. I promise. So, Marco,
just two of these things I would do.
What post Berlusconi? Where are we? Do you think?
Well, we can talk about the Monti phase 1 and Monti phase 2. Monti phase 1 is the one we are witnessing now. He's trying to take Italy out of the brink of collapse. He's passing things that I think both Berlusconi and the left are happy he's passing, because both would have liked to pass in terms of liberalization, and he's doing that in a very clever way, which is he's making a favor to Berlusconi on one side, is making a favor to the left on the other side. And he's popular. He has 59% of support from the public opinion. And the paradox is that the Lombard League, which is the only party which is against him, which is trying to capitalize on Monti as a vampire because he's imposing taxes, is cutting jobs, he's going against the poor people, the craftsmen, and so on. There was a poll within the Lombard League that came out on Radio Padania yesterday. 71% of people in Lombard League are in favor of Monti. So at this moment, Monti has a magic moment, which he is playing very well, and I think he has to go straight, but he has to just go on this first phase is an economic phase. From there to say that Monti is going to tackle heads-on Berlusconi, say, now I changed the media law the day after Berlusconi is going to pull the plug. So Monti has not the power of doing much in terms of constitutional reforms. What he can do is try to strengthen himself by showing the Italians that he's fixing Italy. Then the Italians will come to the conclusion that all the people before him were completely useless, were corrupt. And even Berlusconi was not such a big. And what you see now, the League, is a good test in case, because the people of the League are now against the leadership of the League, probably because Monti comes from Varese, which is 30 miles north of Sesto Calenda, where Boss is coming from.
So
the League is voting north.
Right, so before we get to anything on the media front,
no,
Monti has to get strong. It has to be Monti phase 2.
Absolutely, otherwise he can touch that
so
with the bicycle.
As a matter of interest, what do you think? I don't know the man from Adam. What do you think Monti's instincts would be in terms of media if he was strong enough and had the time to do anything about it?
Well, absolutely. Monti is a free market man. Berlusconi is a monopolist. This is the first distinction. And he tried to be a monopolist. He didn't succeed, but he was very close to doing that. Berlusconi is a guy, if I may say, when I was a journalist, I remember I went to these press conferences, and he hates all what is neutral and institutional. So if he could say, if the Bank of Italy would come out with these data on the GDP saying, well, the Italian GDP increased by 1.2%, Berlusconi would have said, yes, but my pollsters are telling that it was, in fact, 1.6. So he hates whatever is neutral because he wants to turn everything like a football game. So the arbiter, the referee is his greatest enemy. And that's what he was trying to do all the time long in Italy, to kill the referee. Because otherwise, well, he's a sportsman, he had a football team. The referee has always been Scalfaro. He hated him because it was trying to keep him out of power, because he was convicted, he was undergoing trials, and Scalfaro, who died 2 days ago, said, "I'm sorry, I cannot appoint you because you have problem with justice." And he was fuming. He was one of the few, when Scalfaro died 2 days ago, who didn't say a word because he hated it.
So with Monti, go back to the question. So with Monti's instinct.
Monti's instinct is a free market man, and he would try to set up an open society. But Berlusconi is against that. Berlusconi is a man who is against the division of powers. If you can go back to 1600 and melt down, the judiciary, the legislative, and he would do that.
Especially Ius Prima Noctis would be very much liked.
Gian Petro.
Yes,
post Berlusconi.
The Monti factor is really crucial at this point, actually, because of course we don't know the future, but we can guess. And I agree that if Monti touches the media too effectively, the reaction might be very strong from Berlusconi.
What about other media owners? Is he the only problem, or are there others?
No, by the media I mean, if he intervenes into the Rai governance, in 2 months from now there will be the appointment of the new governors of Rai. So that will be the moment where the games will come to the surface and see if Berlusconi is still keeping quiet as he's doing now, or he will explode again. Because you never know. Berlusconi is really...
Given where the country is in economic and given there's an air of certain crisis about it, if Berlusconi started becoming more public and making trouble for Monti, what would the public reaction to that be, do you think?
I don't think that it would be possible, because Berlusconi is a lame duck now. He can't possibly regain a political force that he used to enjoy in the last few years, and he would need a Herculean effort that is no more possible for him.
So do you think Monti will take his opportunity?
He will take his
to change Rai?
Yes, he will try. He will try, and he will be very cautious. But being a smart guy, I guess he will probably touch upon certain critical points, like the order of journalists, which is speaking of liberalization, for instance, he is going to liberalize that also. It won't be very easy, because the journalists themselves will behave probably like the taxi drivers, and of course, because everybody is complaining about the liberalization, so we will see. We will see. As a matter of fact, I must say that Berlusconi won't come back again the way he did before.
So, in 5 years' time, what would your guess be about the way that will Italian media be very different in 5 years' time, do you think?
Yes and no, because I also share some pessimism, because in Italy the worst enemies of press freedom are the journalists themselves, because they are
that's quite a good quote, by the way.
The quote of the day. Yeah, because they are, their DNA is to be. Paolo has written a book with Hallin about the pluralism. About parallelism of the press and the political system. So it would take more than 5 years.
Tell us what you think.
Oh my God. Well, one thing.
So post Berlusconi. First of all, what do you think?
Well,
what do you think the new government will do, if anything?
I think they have been
in 5 years'
encouraging.
time, where will you be?
There have been encouraging signals already, despite obviously the fact that the parliament is still basically with the majority took Berlusconi to power. But for example, we didn't mention the process of digitization that is taking place in Italy that is due to, according to European regulations, to end by the end of this year. And there were some digital frequencies that have been put up for a bid, and under Berlusconi's government, the rules were that there should have been a beauty contest, so that basically these channels, these digital frequencies, should go to broadcasters already with a lot of experience. So somehow it was a way to favor the incumbents, RAI and Mediaset. This government has suspended, following obviously a protest.
So do you think is that a positive thing?
That's a positive thing, although the reason why it was successfully presented was that because this beauty contest was free of charge, obviously the government was not going to get money for the frequencies put on the bid. So the argument, the main argument they won was not the argument of pluralism. The argument was the government needs money, our hard money, and so why are we giving these frequencies for free? But nevertheless, the result is the same, that this has been suspended. Hopefully, there will be another contest. So the government is definitely moving to the right direction. It's true that it has to act quickly because, well, it's true that Berlusconi, it would be risky for Berlusconi to question the government now, but it's also true that the political elections are going to be next year. So it would only be too easy for him to make this government fall even only a few months before the actual elections take place, if this government touches the interest of Berlusconi.
So if there were 2 or 3 key things that you would like the government to do in terms of media freedom or regulation or whatever, what would your priorities be?
Well, definitely the reform of the public service broadcasting system, so the reform of RAI. Let's not forget another thing that wasn't mentioned, that in 2016, the public service contract that RAI has with the government is going to expire. So this is also another opportunity. I know that it sounds far-fetched, but considering even the advance of the new technologies, the popularity of new ways of media, it would also be an opportunity to discuss new ways of public service models. Why necessarily give back to RAI the management of the public service system? This is something that in the few years ahead could be discussed, and we could be prepared for that for when the contract expires. That's one thing. The reform of Agicom,
That's the regulator.
The regulator, because that is also... And just one last thing, that not only in Italy...
Sorry, if you were to reform Agicom...
The system of appointment of the Board of Commissioners...
What would you do to reform it?
Well, definitely we need to pass a new law that creates a different system of appointments that is more independent. For example, now the parliament, 2 members of the Agicom are appointed by the government.
No.
Well, one is appointed under advice of the minister.
That's not true.
It is true.
By the parliament.
No, 2 members out of 9. I'm sorry, I strongly recommend the review in the law. But anyway, 2 members. One is appointed officially by the president, but following the advice of the prime minister. And one else is appointed by the Minister of Economic Development, that is with sub-department of communication. The other 7 are appointed by the parliament, by the broadcasting interparliamentary committee, but with a system that in fact allows each coalition to choose their own members. So it reproduces again the so-called plurality of partialities that Mr. Mancini likes so much. But anyway,
I like so much. You're right.
We'll come to you.
And I said so.
Just 1 second. Hold tight. Go on.
No, the last thing I wanted to say. The law on conflict of interest, it's not just a problem of Italy. I mean, the reason why Berlusconi has, as Mr. Mancini rightly said, for example, with regard to Eastern Europe, Berlusconi has set a dangerous precedent that could be replicated in other countries. And studying the laws, even in the so-called traditional Western democracies, not just the Eastern European new democracies, but we have found out, much to our wonder, amazement, that there is not, except in the UK and in the US outside Europe, but in no other European countries there are rules that discipline the conflict of interest. So there could be many budding Berlusconi that could mushroom in many other European countries, which now look very disdainfully at us. So I would recommend maybe some kind of concerted action for the Council of Europe to issue a recommendation to deal this, but at a European level, because we were the first, as we often are in Italy, for all the wrong reasons. But we always spread the bad examples, and we don't want this to happen.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And just to to finish our session, Paolo, you had the first word. You can have the last. So, what do you think will happen in the next 5 years, and what do you think should happen?
May I try to respond to...
Briefly, yes.
Briefly is a problem, so I don't respond at all.
Go on.
What I'm trying to suggest in this book is that there are a plurality of reasons why Berlusconi is still there. One is political, weakness of leftists. He was able to build good alliances, political alliances. They have not been... so political reasons. Communication, ownership of the media, and I completely agree. But also the fact that he has been very good in using the media, and the others have not been so good in using the media. And then there is a sort of a mixture, a framework of symbolic reason. There is this nice book by Beppe Severnini, an Italian journalist. He wrote this book on La pancia degli italiani, the stomach of Italians. Berlusconi represents the stomach of Italians. And he says, why Italians like me, Berlusconi? Because they like to be like me. So there is a mixture of national identity that finds place within Berlusconi. He represents the Italians. I know that most of Italian, my fellow citizens, would not like this. But this is the reality. A big percentage, a large percentage of Italians would like to be like Berlusconi. This is one of the reasons. What next? I would stay on media and politics. The disappearance of Berlusconi is a big problem for the media, because they don't have anything to talk about. Berlusconi was, this is true, was the way in which the Italian media market was constructed. Italy is a very polarized country in terms of politics, in terms of media. Berlusconi has been the fortune of La Repubblica. The diffusion of the circulation of La Repubblica went up with the famous 10 questions. And Il Fatto Quotidiano built its circulation on the base against Berlusconi. And the same on the right. Il Giornale against the leftists, Libero against the leftists, Santoro on one side, the success of Santoro being against Berlusconi, Travaglio being against, and on the other side, Emilio Fede and Rete 4, the Mediaset television news, build their success on being against the left. Now, what happens? He's not there anymore. How can the Italian polarized system can survive? This is a big problem for the media. Very lucky.
Politics, you should enter politics.
You think that I would be successful?
You could be. In fact,
maybe this is a good suggestion. No,
you could be the next stomach of Italy.
No. So I think that it's in terms of. It is an occasion to reconstruct the Italian political environment, but also the media environment. But can I go back to what you say? Don't blame journalists. And Cristina says blame journalists. I don't think that is a question of blaming or not. Journalists are part of a problem, of Italian problem. They've been always affiliated with some view. As most of Italian citizens have been affiliated with some view, and this is still a problem. So probably the reform of RAI will never take place because most of RAI people don't want to be reformed. Because their success depends on who is in power. Okay. This is a problem, much deeper problem, and that.
Okay. Well, on that extraordinarily happy note, I think the panel have been remarkably candid. Thank you very much for your contributions, your appreciation, please. Thank you very much.